The galaxy trembled when the emergency beacon of khatre 7 flared across every relay. Something ancient had escaped containment, a creature the Guild archives called Apex 1. It was a living extinction event, a predator that had once erased entire ecosystems before being sealed beneath a moon of steel and plasma. Now, the prison was silent. The Apex was free again. The Galactic Council gathered in orbit. Thousands of worlds tuned into the declaration that followed. The Apex Protocol is active. The Hunters Guild is authorized. But the Guild was far. 2 weeks away, minimum. And khatre 7 was already burning. In desperation, the Council opened the Auxiliary Hunter Program, a loophole clause meant for planetary allies to send emergency support. Hundreds of names poured in: mercenaries, veterans, war beasts. And one name from a backwater world that made the chamber go silent. Maya Chen. Age, 17. Earth. Her credentials weren't military, biological, or even professional. She was a VR Hunter Sim champion, ranked first globally in Predator Protocol, a virtual survival game modeled after guild tactics. Someone in Earth's diplomatic office, desperate to make their mark, had submitted her score under strategic experience. Bureaucracy stamped it as valid. The other delegates laughed. You sent a child. You sent a gamer. Earth's ambassador didn't flinch. We sent the best hunter we have. By the time her transport dropped from hyperspace, the jokes were still circulating through council channels. The planet below was a scar, jungles turned to ash, atmospheres shimmering with heat distortion. The landing pad was half-melted metal. The research facility nearby had collapsed in on itself, its outer hull clawed apart. The support team on site, a handful of alien soldiers and technicians, eyed the newcomer in silence. A thin human in an exosuit too big for her, visor scratched, rifle slung awkwardly across her back. One of the soldiers, reptilian and twice her height, muttered, "She's bait." Maya didn't answer. She adjusted her visor, scanned the tree line, and began tagging sensor points. Her voice, when she finally spoke, was calm. "Where did you lose your people?" They led her to a clearing where the first response unit had vanished. Only fragments of armor remained, each piece burned from the inside out. Maya crouched, picking up a shard of glass-like resin. Melted, not burned. The ground around it rippled with strange circular depressions, tracks, but not symmetrical. Whatever made them moved faster than gravity should allow. They told her the Apex hunted by sound and pheromones. It could mimic distress signals. It killed drones first, then followed retreat signals back to command nodes. Every guild hunter who'd faced it in ancient history had died before landing a single blow. Maya reviewed the footage from a scout drone before it was shredded. The image was nothing but static and shrieking noise. But buried in the distortion, she caught a rhythm, sonar pulses reflected through heat shimmer. The creature wasn't seeing, it was feeling the vibrations of the air. Not blind, she murmured, but deaf to silence. She scavenged broken comm units, stripped them for parts, and began assembling something crude. The soldiers watched her with disbelief as she wired transmitters into a motion decoy. "What are you doing?" one asked. "Playing hide and seek," she said. She planted the decoy 50 meters from the crater, activated it, and moved opposite, crouching low. The device began emitting human distress calls, looped from the old drone logs. For a long moment, there was nothing, then the jungle shifted. Branches bent without wind. The air vibrated like a pulse. The apex moved faster than anything natural, 6 limbs, mirrored exoskeleton, a mouth that folded open in spirals. It lunged toward the sound, shattering trees in its path. The moment it struck, the decoy detonated in a burst of plasma and noise. Not a lethal hit, but bright enough to overload its sonar sense. Maya fired 3 shots into its flank, not to kill, but to make it move. The beast thrashed, striking the air, trying to locate her. She fired again, from a different angle. Confused, it bolted into the tree line, tearing its own path into the rock face. Then silence. The aliens stared at her. One whispered, "It missed." Maya retrieved the smoking transmitter and smirked beneath her visor. Now it knows what it feels like to be hunted. That night, while the survivors argued over protocol, she sat alone beside the dead comm tower and recorded her log. Khatre 7. Local time, 23:18. Apex 1 contact confirmed. It hunts by sound and pheromone, not by sight. It's faster than anything we've got. But it reacts, it doesn't think. It doesn't improvise. It expects prey to run. So I didn't. A pause, static crackling. They think sending me was a mistake. Maybe it was. But the thing about humans is, we get creative when we're scared. Somewhere in the black canopy beyond, the apex screamed, a low, echoing shriek that rolled through the atmosphere and rattled the ground. Maya looked up, smiled faintly, and switched off the recorder. For the first time since its release, the apex had missed a kill. And someone had laughed while doing it. Maya woke before dawn, long before the alien team stirred. The planet's twin suns were just rising, throwing sharp shadows across the ruins. She had spent the night tracking patterns, flight paths of scavenger birds, wind direction, and the strange residue left behind where the apex had passed. It wasn't blood, it was acidic protein. The air smelled of iron and ozone. She used a stick to draw lines in the dirt, marking the radius of each attack point. Every strike had occurred within a predictable zone, a hunting circle roughly 7 kilometers wide. The creature was territorial. That was its weakness. Her wrist pad buzzed with transmissions from command. Analysts wanted updates. They wanted sensor data, drone footage, biometric readings. She ignored them. Their satellites couldn't see through Khatre 7's thick atmosphere. Her eyes were enough. The alien soldiers watched as she gathered scraps, rope, torn cables, reflective foil from burned supply drops. They whispered among themselves, half amused, half pitying. To them, it looked like superstition. She tied knots with mechanical precision, setting traps that belonged in a forest, not a war zone. One of them finally spoke. "You think you can catch it with toys?" Maya didn't look up. "I'm not catching it. I'm confusing it." By midday, she had 10 traps scattered across the ridge. Each one emitted faint vibrations timed to the planet's seismic rhythm. The apex hunted by feeling the world move, she'd make the world move too much. Hours later, the sensors spiked. The creature was close. It approached low, cautious now. The ground pulsed as it moved. When it hit the ridge, she triggered the first law. The vibration threw off its sonar balance, forcing it to veer sideways, right into a pit she'd camouflaged with foil. The fall wasn't deep, but it disoriented it long enough for her to strike from cover. 3 plasma shots found its flank. The skin didn't burn, it reflected the energy, but one shot struck an exposed joint. The apex screeched, scrambling upward, tearing through rock. It fled, but for the first time, it fled from something. Galactic Command was silent for hours, reviewing her feed. Then came the voice of an officer she'd never met. Human, confirmed that was intentional. "Yes. Explain your logic." "I stopped thinking like a hunter. Started thinking like prey." Her plan went viral across the fleet. The aliens were fascinated, horrified, divided. Some called it luck. Others began copying her tactics in simulations, and failing. Because her method wasn't algorithmic. It was instinct. That night, she listened to the apex move in the darkness. Its rhythm had changed. It wasn't following routes anymore, it was testing her. Maya adjusted her traps, moving them randomly, dismantling patterns before they could form. She rubbed mud across her armor to mask heat signature, disabled her locator beacon, and started whispering instead of speaking aloud. The aliens couldn't understand the chaos. "You're fighting without order," one officer transmitted. "That's how you survive on Earth," she replied. "You don't outsmart the storm, you ride it." By the 4th day, the apex had learned. It started avoiding open areas, hiding in the same blind zones she'd once used. Maya realized she'd made it smarter. The thought didn't scare her. It thrilled her. She began leaving bait, shards of metal coated in fuel gel. When the apex investigated, the traps didn't explode, they sang high-frequency sounds that mimicked its own hunting calls. It grew confused, frustrated, violent. It tore through its own hunting grounds trying to silence the echoes. Maya's supply dwindled, but her understanding grew. She could predict its reactions within seconds now. It wasn't a god. It was a creature of habit. And that made it mortal. At dusk, she sat beside the broken relay tower, recording again. Her voice was hoarse but steady. Day 4. Apex adapting faster than expected. But it's emotional now, reckless. Maybe that's the key. Not to outfight it. To make it feel. Every species that feels can break. Static crackled. Somewhere above, the orbital fleet listened in silence. To them, she sounded calm. To her, it felt like walking a knife's edge. One mistake and she'd vanish like the others. The next morning, a drone from command dropped fresh supplies, mostly sensors and medkits. She ignored both and used the casing of the drone itself to craft decoys. Aluminum shell, reshaped to reflect sonar. She placed them in a crescent formation around the creature's last known lair. The apex emerged near noon. Faster than before, silent now, learning stealth. But she was already gone from where it expected her. The decoys came alive, each echoing faint human breathing, recorded from her own audio logs. The apex spun wildly, claws carving air, attacking ghosts. She shot once, twice, 3 times, each hit landing where the exoskeleton was weakest. The creature roared and crashed through the clearing, vanishing again. Command hailed her. Target wounded. Yes. Do you require extraction? No. Reason. I'm not done hunting. She didn't sleep that night. The air hummed with energy, the apex was circling. She could feel it watching her from beyond the sensor line. The fear was gone now, replaced by focus. In her log, she whispered, "They think humans are hunters. They are wrong. We're survivors pretending to be hunters. Every animal on Earth learned to run first, fight second, and think third. That's what makes us dangerous. We never stop learning." Thunder rolled across the horizon as the creature screamed again, but it wasn't the same sound. It wasn't triumph. It was frustration. For the first time, the apex hesitated. It had begun to understand that the small, fragile thing from Earth didn't play by its rules. Somewhere in the orbiting command deck, a guild officer murmured, "She fights like she's making it up as she goes." Another replied, "She is." On the planet below, Maya grinned beneath her cracked visor, whispering into the night, "Welcome to the game." And above them, the galaxy watched a teenager from Earth turn an apex predator into a nervous animal. The hunt was no longer one-sided. It had become something else, an education. By the time dawn broke, the apex's tracks led away from her camp. It was retreating to higher ground, cautious, reactive, uncertain. For the first time in recorded history, something other than the apex had claimed dominance over its hunting ground. And for the first time in galactic memory, the galaxy began to whisper a new phrase. The human is still alive. The apex struck at dawn. It came like a thunderclap, tearing through the jungle canopy with the force of a meteor. The command outpost never saw it coming. One moment the monitors were static, the next, everything was red. The creature had learned stealth, using the electromagnetic storms to mask its approach. The alien soldiers barely had time to scream. Maya woke to the tremor and the sound of tearing metal. She ran toward the smoke. The camp was already gone, shredded into molten fragments. Bodies half vaporized, the air thick with ozone. The apex had evolved again. It wasn't hunting for food anymore. It was eliminating threats. It had learned fear, and in response, it had become ruthless. She found what was left of the armory: one intact fuel cell, a half-melted rifle, and an alien data pad flickering in static. She rigged the cell to overload and set it near the ruins. The apex returned minutes later, still dripping molten armor. She waited until its shadow covered her, then triggered the detonator. The blast tore through the jungle, flinging her backward. Her visor cracked. Her shoulder dislocated. But when the smoke cleared, she was still breathing. The apex was gone again, wounded, enraged, and hunting. She could feel its presence like static on her skin. The galaxy watched through her live feed as she staggered to her feet, blood mixing with dirt, voice calm as stone. Still alive. Command begged her to retreat. She refused. They wanted a data link, but she cut comms. No one else understood what was happening. This wasn't a battle between soldier and monster anymore. It was a duel of instincts. She scavenged from the wreckage, building traps from alien debris, magnetic shards, broken drones, and pieces of hull plating. Each fragment became part of a plan so reckless no machine would attempt it. She opened her logs again. Rule 1. Don't chase what's stronger. Rule 2. Don't run forever. Rule 3. When all else fails, change the rules. She studied the creature's behavior through motion data. It was cautious now, no longer charging blindly. She realized it was mirroring her, adapting, hesitating, calculating. It was becoming smarter the longer it survived. That meant she needed to stop thinking like a soldier entirely. She remembered old footage from Earth, wolves herding prey, gorillas fighting tanks, and swarming predators 1,000 times their size. None fought directly. All fought by forcing the enemy to react. If it's learning my logic, she whispered, then it's time to give it madness. She began constructing chaos. Reflective traps that spun randomly in the wind, bait trails that looped back on themselves, and sound emitters broadcasting laughter, gunfire, silence, anything unpredictable. The planet became a maze of noise and illusion. For the first time, the apex faltered. It attacked shadows, striking at echoes that vanished mid-view. The feed from orbit showed erratic movement patterns, a perfect predator turned paranoid. Analysts couldn't explain it. The Council called it an anomaly. But on Earth, every human watching the broadcast understood. She was breaking it psychologically. Maya's own fear faded. Pain replaced it, then focus. Every breath hurt, but each one reminded her she was still winning. She dragged cables across ravines, rerouted energy from the wrecked ship into mines, and baited the apex with the simplest lure of all, curiosity. She left her old helmet in the open, visor cracked, motion sensors active. When the apex investigated, the helmet emitted a heartbeat, hairs, recorded. It lunged. The cliff beneath it collapsed. She had used the ship's thrusters to hollow out the ground hours earlier. The creature plunged into the chasm, roaring, its armor fractured. The impact was seismic. The planet shook. From orbit, they saw the crater. Command assumed it was over. But Maya didn't move. She knew better. She climbed down the ridge, rifle in hand, silent. The crater glowed with molten light. The apex was still alive, dragging itself forward, bleeding something that looked like liquid mercury. It hissed when it saw her, not a roar, not a scream, but something almost like recognition. She whispered into her recorder, voice trembling but sure. Day 7. Final phase. It's not invincible. It's just stubborn. Like us. She armed the last explosive, a compact ion bomb salvaged from the station's reactor. It wasn't meant for combat, but she'd rewritten the alien code to trigger manually. She stepped into the crater, 30 meters from the creature. It tried to rise. She waited, heart pounding in sync with the blinking detonator. The apex lunged one last time, pure instinct. She threw the bomb under its chest and dove behind a shard of rock. The explosion tore through the air, silent flash, then thunder. When the light faded, the creature was writhing, half its frame melted, legs gone. Maya crawled forward, grabbed the knife she'd carried since the first day, and drove it into the exposed nerve cluster where its neck met its core. The blade sank deep. The apex convulsed once, then went still. For a long moment, there was only the sound of rain hitting molten ground. Her visor feed flickered, reconnecting with orbit. The galaxy watched as she knelt beside the corpse of a myth and breathed out, steady and calm. She activated her MIC target neutralized. Static. Then a single voice from command. Repeat, human, did you say neutralized? She looked at the camera drone hovering above her shoulder, expression unreadable. I said it's over. In the silence that followed, analysts confirmed what no guild hunter had ever achieved. The apex's neural core was inactive. The readings were conclusive. The monster that had ended thousands of lives was dead. But the data also revealed something no one expected: traces of neurochemical stress throughout its brain. Signs of confusion. Fear. The apex had felt terror before it died. In that realization, the galaxy shifted. The perfect predator had been unmade by a mind it considered beneath notice. Maya sat among the smoke, knife still in her hand, recording her last log. They'll want to study it. They'll want to learn how I did it. But they'll miss the point. It wasn't strength. It wasn't skill. It was desperation with direction. Her eyes drifted toward the horizon where the first dawn broke through the ash. You can't predict something that refuses to follow its own logic. That's what being human means. Chaos with purpose. The transmission ended there. The council tried to hail her again, but the feed had already gone dark. All that remained was the echo of her words carried through static. When the galaxy's apex predator met Earth's apex improviser, it learned terror. The retrieval ships landed 2 days later. Their scanners confirmed no life signs from the apex, but they approached with weapons primed anyway. What they found instead was a wasteland of glass soil and a single heat signature: a human sitting beside a colossal corpse, motionless but alive. Maya didn't stand when they arrived. She just pointed at the creature's remains. Tag it before the scavengers get ideas. Her voice was raw, her body held together by cracked armor and stubbornness. They took her aboard without ceremony. The med drones tried to sedate her, but she refused. She wanted to watch the planet shrink beneath the viewport. For 7 days she had breathed its poisoned air, hunted a myth, and survived on grit and caffeine rations. Now, as khatre 7 dwindled to a glowing dot, she finally exhaled. Reports spread faster than the rescue craft could travel. Across 100 systems, feeds replayed the same moment: a teenager from Earth ending the life of the galaxy's oldest predator. The council chambers overflowed with speculation. Some called it fabrication, others divine chance. The Hunters Guild filed protests, claiming the kill invalid, unsanctioned, reckless, unorthodox. But no one could deny the data. The apex's neural decay was real, and the telemetry showed human fingerprints on every command. When Maya stepped into the council hall, the galaxy stared. She looked small against the marble and light of the chamber, her armor still scorched, her eyes steady. The Grand Marshal of the Guild leaned forward, voice sharp. Your actions violated every combat regulation. You tampered with restricted ordnance, caused ecological collapse, and acted without command authority. She met his gaze. You asked for a hunter. You got a result. A low murmur spread through the chamber. The Marshal slammed his clawed hand against the console. You broke procedure. She smiled faintly. So did the apex. That's why it lost. Silence followed, heavy and electric. A counselor from the outer colonies spoke softly. Explain your method, human. How did you win? I stopped trying to win, she said. I survived longer than it expected me to. Everything after that was panic, mine first, then its. The translators took a full second to catch up. The simplicity of it unsettled them. A creature designed for perfection undone by panic and instinct. They reviewed her combat logs for days. Every improvisation was labeled an anomaly. Every unpredictable move became a line of study. They named it the Chen pattern, behavior too erratic for predictive modeling. Military strategists dissected her choices, searching for algorithmic explanation, and found none. The Guild eventually conceded the title of Apex Class Elimination to Earth's representative. Reluctantly, but publicly, they added her to the records beside the greatest hunters of every species. Her file contained a single annotation: outcome, unreproducible. When she returned to Earth, there were parades waiting, speeches scripted, medals prepared. She attended none. Instead, she visited the simulation center where it had all started, the VR pods where she'd learned to hunt imaginary monsters. The same trainers who once dismissed her stared in awe. She walked past them, placed her old headset on the console, and left without a word. Later that night, she recorded one final log. Her voice was quiet, almost detached. They called it the apex because they thought perfection couldn't be beaten. But perfection's just another kind of blindness. It stops learning. We don't. That's our edge. We keep breaking our own rules until something works. She paused. They think I'm some kind of hero. I'm not. I panic smarter, that's all. Fear's the oldest teacher we've got. The file was transmitted to the Galactic archives and archived under human psychology. It would be required reading for every future guild recruit. Some laughed at the simplicity. Others studied it like scripture. Months later, the council gathered again, not for crisis but reflection. Scientists presented their findings from the Apex's autopsy. The data was conclusive. Its neural pathways had undergone chemical breakdown associated with stress. The galaxy's perfect predator had died terrified. No known species had ever induced that response before. They debated what it meant, whether fear was a weakness or proof of consciousness. In the end, they added a new classification to their bestiary: type human prey pattern threat. Definition: entities capable of inducing adaptive collapse through cognitive unpredictability. The Hunters Guild restructured its doctrine. The Chen principle became standard training: adaptation is victory. Predictability is death. They taught recruits to think like prey, to improvise, to fail creatively. They called it human hunting logic. It terrified them, but it worked. On Earth, Maya lived quietly, refusing interviews. Her story spread without her help. Some turned her into myth, others into a lesson. The children who grew up hearing it didn't see her as a soldier, but as proof that humanity didn't need to match the galaxy's strength, only its imagination. Years later, a memorial was built in orbit above khatre 7. Not a statue, but a beacon transmitting one line in every known language: when the galaxy needed its greatest hunters, Earth sent a survivor. Maya never visited. She didn't need to. The galaxy had already written its legend, and legends were cages of their own. She preferred the open sky. In her last known transmission, sent to no one in particular, she said, "They'll keep making monsters. That's what intelligent life does. But as long as there's one human left willing to try something stupid, they'll never win for long." The message ended with static and a faint laugh: tired, fearless, human. Historians centuries later would call her story the turning point of interspecies warfare. Philosophers would quote her final words in arguments about chaos theory and survival instinct. Soldiers would whisper her name before missions where odds didn't matter. But for the galaxy, the deeper lesson was simpler: perfection breaks when it meets something that refuses to stay in the lines. Humanity didn't conquer the stars through power or purity, it did it by being messy, stubborn, unpredictable. The apex had been evolution's masterpiece. Maya Chen was evolution's accident. And accidents, it turned out, were deadlier. In the Grand Archives, her record remains unchanged. Status: alive. Occupation: hunter. Result: fear confirmed. And in every world that studied her footage, one realization lingered: that somewhere, among billions of complacent civilizations, existed a species that didn't just adapt to chaos, it was chaos. When the galaxy called for its greatest hunters, Earth sent not a warrior, not a soldier, not a legend. It sent a girl with cracked armor, shaking hands, and the courage to laugh in the dark. And in that laughter, the galaxy learned humility.